Okay, so first let's start off with if you could tell me or our viewers what SCU is and what your role is within it.
Sure. Uh, Basically, it's SCU is an organization called the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. It originally was called the Scientific Coalition for UFOlogy, but we changed it with the term change that came about that more accurately depicted what the objects really are. They're about objects that are in air and space and actually in the water as well. Um, so we have a situation where a group of us got together, formed an organization in 2017 that was going to be dedicated to scientific study. We've now got in excess of 250 members. We've been having conferences and things like that since then. I'm one of the founding officers, of course, one of the board officers, and there's about five of us that originally got started with it, but now we've grown to a board of about eight, with advisors as well. So it's pretty exciting, and that's what the organization's about.
Okay, now how many members would you say you have, and is there any particular fields that are represented more than others, or is it sort of across the spectrum?
The 250 people that we have as members in SU are largely across all parts of the different disciplines and different degree. Some of them degreed. A good number of them have PhDs. At the same time, we have most all of them having advanced degrees. But we do cover, everything from psychology to physics to medicine to law enforcement and a whole bunch of disciplines.
Is there a position you guys take on the reality of UAPs, or is it that you are arguing the phenomenon should just be studied?
We tend to look at it from this standpoint that there is a phenomena. It's already been admitted to the fact that UFOs or UAPs exist by the federal government. A lot of us have been at this for a long time, and we know that they were in existence, but we just don't know what they are. And so our goal is to be able to scientifically study them, and use scientific principles and methodologies to do that. And that's been something that's been rather remiss for a long, long period of time, and it's sorely needed.
Yeah. One of the things that is interesting about all this, especially in light of David Grusch's recent, coming forward and saying that there may well be crash retrieval programs and back engineering efforts and whatnot, is that if this is true, it means that there are portions of the government who knew that some fundamental aspect of our reality is not what everyone thinks it is. And that if that's been kept from us, a lot of people might think that that's some sort of like an existential betrayal almost. What are your thoughts that if these programs turn out to be true, how can opening it up to a broader array of science minds like yourself and your organization, how might that benefit any effort to back engineer or understand those? And do you feel like this type of knowledge is something that should be kept from people?
Well, if you look at the whole crash retrieval and the idea of what's just come out with David Grusch, it's not just come out. We've heard about Roswell, we've heard about Kecksburg, we've heard about a whole lot of crashes that have happened over a period of time, and maybe the general public's ignorant about them. But how can you, claim that anybody doesn't know at this point about Roswell? It's been all over the board in terms of what that crash is about. So there's nothing new in the idea that we've had crashes around the globe, basically. There was a gentleman by the name of Glenn Stringfield who published 6 monographs that detailed something close to allegedly 200 crashes that have happened around the globe. And this was back in the 70s. So the whole notion of crash retrievals is nothing new. It's been alleged that the government has been having them, that was doing reverse engineering on them. But we've never had anybody officially at a high level position, if you would, that came out and said that exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what makes, David Grusch very, very unique. I think that overall, it's a situation where I think, we have to balance between what national security is with what the public wants. And as well as I do that if I announced that I had some sort of an advanced new weapon system that the Chinese and the Russians would be very, very interested in it and would be doing everything in their power to be able to get that information. The same is true with any kind of a crash retrieval of an object. In fact, I will point out to you the fact that they probably have the same type of programs going on to re-engineer and to try to figure out how these things would work. Because who wouldn't want to have some sort of a craft capable of doing what these things have been doing all along, which are basically going beyond hypersonic speeds, making defying gravity, if you would, and doing instantaneous acceleration. Every political entity on the planet would want to know that. So they would be very carefully listening to what we say and what we do. And so it's in national security interest to basically keep it quiet to the best of our ability, and allow us to do the science to see if we can actually do anything with re-engineering that. So you get what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
It's a delicate balance between the two. I think the public does want to know about this stuff, and it certainly, if there is intelligent life that is visiting our planet, yeah, maybe the world should know that, and there should be some admission. But how do you actually make that announcement, and how do you craft it in such a way that you're not going to be upending a lot of different, religious views that people have, political views that people have, and everything else, and then at the same time deal with the national security concerns.
Yeah. One of the things that people have talked about, I interviewed Bob McGuire, who was a member of your organization, a great guy. He came on the show I guess the week that David Grusch came out, and helped to contextualize a lot of it. But one of the things that he mentioned that might be part of the reason for the secrecy, and obviously it's conjecture, but the energetic source for something like this, if it could be made to sort of backfill our energy demands or whatever, it could be a world-changing, paradigm-shifting kind of technology. Do you think that something like that might be possible? I mean, looking at the evidence that you've seen in terms of the speed and the maneuvers and how these things can do what has forever seemed impossible, do you think that there might be transformative technology within those that could potentially benefit humankind?
I think it's a challenge to be able to figure out a technology and how it would work. Let me put it, if it actually crashed, let's say it crashed, and there's debris all over the ground, and you didn't know what the power source was. You didn't know how it actually, it basically did what it did. If you had materials, for example, that you were looking at, would you understand those things? Would you be able to figure out what they're about? We've talked about the fact that, like if you actually did find some piece, would you know its basic function? What did it do? How did it operate? And I think that's where, there's a lot of gray area when you're dealing with potentially a craft that may be thousands of years in advance of ours, right? And we just don't understand what it is. So, but I do think that material science could be advanced. We should be able to figure out something about the material itself and use that. And then there's some allegations that may have actually happened with the Roswell crash. If you take a look at the fact that there was bendable metal, and there's also a lightweight material. Well, today we have a thing called shape memory alloy, which is basically being used in aircraft and various other things that actually duplicates that kind of same memory metal kind of thing, where it can bend back and return to its shape if you squeeze it, or a lightweight material that you can actually bend. You can't bend it, you can't burn it, and all that stuff that was alleged in the Roswell event. Yeah. So I think that material science can be potentially advanced. We may not understand how this thing works or how it operates, or may not even have the means to do it. Some people suggested, well, what if it's mental, or if it's some sort of a mental thing with telepathic, if you would, that operates the machine, and you have to have an alien hand. Well, how do you replicate that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that it's going to be a challenge to us to figure that out. But I think that overall, after all the many decades that we've had with materials, even from Roswell, if there is that material, we probably have learned something, and then we would have applied that in some of our aircraft designs or something of that nature to the best of our ability.
Yeah. I'm curious about your feelings regarding the state of science. It's interesting to me that for 50 years there's been a pair, what do you call it, people who have wanted to look into this have been punished socially and professionally, and it's been an ongoing issue that started to thaw recently. I think that there are more and more academics feeling comfortable talking about it and also trying to get involved in the research. But at every point in history, we've always thought we've had it figured out. Before we figured out quantum physics, it was like we were right around the corner from a few details of figuring out a theory of how the whole universe works, and it was mechanical and it was totally wrong. We've gotten now into trying to figure out quantum truth, or whatever you want to call it, and we've gotten some understandings there. But why do we seem to think that we're always on the verge of completely figuring it out. Should this remind us, if this all turns out to be true, to be way more humble in what we, believe ourselves to know? Does that make sense?
I think that, if you take a look at the back, let me go back for a second. I got started in this like 59 years ago. I didn't, when I was doing investigations and things of that nature, I didn't have a little iPhone that I could walk around with. I barely had a tape recorder that actually worked. I had to take and have people draw with, colored pencils what they had seen, because there was really nothing there. I didn't have anything that really supported me. And if you look at that from my context anyway, after nearly 6 generations or decades of looking at this, the advancements that have happened have been incredible. I mean, and so we continue to advance, but I think that, we're still in the dark in many respects, and we're probably just about at the, maybe at the toddler stage of our understanding of things. And I think that it's just going to require a lot more time and study. And the problem we've had with this phenomenon is that it's been largely anecdotal. A lot of people just telling stories.
Yeah.
Okay. And until you have actual scientific tools to go and actually look at things, for example, like in something beyond the visible range of the electromagnetic spectrum, and actually, look at in the IR ranges, or you look in the microwave ranges, look in some of the other gamma ray, what do these things look like in that context? We might learn more. And I think that it goes also beyond our just hearing anecdotal stories from people saying, well, I saw a UFO last night. Well, and then you're out there doing an investigation on it, and oh, by the way, it's already gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, we have to get really solid data, and we're starting to see some of that happening with the fact that we've improved on our aircraft, our radar systems on that, and so that's why you're seeing a lot of military cases where now suddenly we have that technology that's advanced and actually is starting to detect these things that we didn't see before.
Yeah.
And so now let's take that opportunity to be able to get these multi-sensory kinds of data inputs, if you would, into our study to now allow us to get better understanding of the objects. And so that's what Arrow's trying to do. That is what they're all trying to do up, with the whole the intent of that. That's what we're trying to do. We want scientific data, because the scientific data is going to help us to understand them better. And I think that our technology is advancing, it's getting cheaper to use, and we're starting to see where we can actually do that.
Yeah, I agree with you that we are like in the toddler stage of really understanding maybe the nature of reality. Has there been a problem with people who are in scientific authority being too close-minded to things that might seem on the surface to be outside of what we would normally consider likely?
I'm going to say that that's changed. I consider from the time that Project Blue Book closed in 1969 until 2017, I often consider that the scientific dark ages for UFOs or UAP study.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you had to look at it from the context that the National Academy of Sciences basically dismissed the whole concept. They agreed with the Condon report that said there's nothing to this. There's no need to do any more scientific investigation. And in fact, you had research journals that would they would dismiss any articles that would be printed or on that kind of research.
Yeah.
And so what's happened in 2017 is suddenly you've got an announcement, the fact that the government is saying that they have a project that they've been looking into it, and now they're treating it, as being a serious kind of phenomena. and so that's now started to open up where there's a stigma associated with it, and there's a stigma with the term UFOs, right? Which is why they wanted to move away from that, because
Yeah.
it always led into woo-woo kind of things, and a
Little
lot of
green men
people,
and all that. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so now let's make it UAP. It's unidentified aerial phenomena or whatever. And so let's rephrase it, rebrand it, if you would. Let's get it over to the point where we can actually get scientists who are willing to get engaged. And that's what we're seeing in SCU, is that we're suddenly getting a large number of scientific minded people who previously were in the closet about it, who are now suddenly actually wanting to come out and study it and openly and write papers. And so now we're getting, papers actually put forward on the subject. So I think that change culturally it takes a while for that. I'm not saying that the stigma is not there yet, because I think that there are still academics, organizations that still don't agree with it. You still have, a lot of religions haven't changed their mind about the phenomena. They haven't, and then at the same time, you still have even the stigma in terms of reporting it within the military. That's not going to change overnight, where you got now a pilot that wants to come forward talking about it. And so that's going to take some time for that to actually happen. And I'm glad to say that it's actually now happening more frequently.
Sure. And it seems like as we accelerate with the information that's in the ecosphere and everything else, that hopefully will snowball, and eventually
Yes.
the gates might fully break open. I initially spoke with you at Phenomicon, and that was last year, where I had a great time. And I am personally fascinated by the show, Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. I understand that it's a television show, and it's edited in a way that's sensational, I guess. But I wanted to get your opinion about the science that's being conducted there. There's a lot of people who are like, well, if it's on TV or if it's on the History Channel, it automatically can't be taken seriously. And they're not necessarily making any assertions about what they're finding. They're just like sort of pointing out different anomalies and kind of identifying them, tagging them, and then moving on, and then coming back later to poke those different anomalies. But can you help for people who may be wanting to take it seriously but not knowing whether they can? Is that real science, and is that real research? Should we really be paying attention to what's happening on that show, in your opinion?
Well, first off, let me clarify that it's a mixture of entertainment at the same time, and also an investigation.
Sure.
So, an ongoing investigation, you're going to use technical or scientific tools to be able to collect data that's going to help you to understand whatever the phenomena is. So in that regard, the show is actually a very good show in the context of using equipment to be able to collect data, and then also to analyze that data. Now, what we don't see is that, and if you probably know this as well, but there's only like 1/10 of the entire amount of research that's being actually filmed by the History Channel, if you will.
Sure. Or
Right?
even aired. I mean, like they
Or
have
even
way more than
aired,
they aired. Yeah.
And so most things end up on the cutting floor and are not there. And it's not like the crew lives at the ranch. So you have a situation where Eric Bard, for example, who practically lives there 24/7 and does a lot of analysis, who is to be commended, by the way, because he spends a lot of time that's not on the air doing a lot of that analytical research and looking into things, and actually, and then you have Travis Taylor, who is also supporting it, trying to do it. Travis, has a day job. He works over here in Huntsville, where I live.
Sure. Yeah.
At Radiance Technologies.
And he's also been the chief scientist of the UAP task force, which is where Grusch was. And he found out all those secrets. So
yes,
he's really plugged in. It's not like he's,
that's you're absolutely correct. And when he's not doing that, he's got 23 or 24 science fiction books that he's put together, and he's also on a whole bunch of other shows with I think History Channel as well. So I mean, it's not like he can't dedicate the amount of time that, let's say, an Eric can, but the point I'm trying to get at is that they attempt to go out and use some sort of technical tools to be able to get scientific data, to be able to have it analyzed, and then like I pointed out to Travis, I said, I'm hoping that all this stuff gets written up in a paper at some point and then scientifically peer reviewed and everything else. But I think that, for the most part, I would encourage people to watch the show. number one, to see how an investigation unfolds or what can be done and how typically that might happen.
Mhm.
But at the same time, also to learn about the technology tools we do have
Yeah.
and how those come across. So, for example, if you take a look at the LiDAR, which show these like two vortices, if you would, that were going up from
Yeah.
the
Yeah. They had the,
right?
yeah, totally.
So I'm with a group of people now across actually the world who are looking at LiDAR, and we're finding out that we're seeing the vortices like that in other parts of the world
Wow.
in LiDAR.
Yeah.
So now, is it number one, is it some sort of a LiDAR error? We don't know, but we should
Mhm.
learn about it, right?
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is to look at potential errors that could be coming up. Is it some sort of an artifact as a result of the equipment or whatever? But we're finding this in public forums that show LiDAR of terrains and various other things where we're seeing these vortices. We're also seeing triangles and other kinds of things that are in the LiDAR images from like up in Sweden and various other things.
The
So
Hessdalen Light place, or is that what you're talking about?
yeah, well, and not even in Hessdalen, but near it.
Okay.
So, you have that kind of thing going on. So it might be more of a global phenomenon than we think about. But we want to learn about LiDAR and its capabilities, but at the same time, some of the other things that go on with it in terms of potential errors, or there might, and if you saw the NASA hearing that took
Yeah.
place,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
they focused a lot on the fact that you have a situation where you have to have instrumentation calibrated. Well, some of these things could be calibration errors, and they want to be able to eliminate calibration errors. They
Yeah.
also want to be able to look at the fact that, well, wait a minute, you might be recording something and you have a cell phone right next to it, and there's electromagnetic effects coming from your cell phone that are being detected on the equipment.
Yeah.
We have to eliminate that, which means you need to carefully construct, if you would, your scientific analyses and in your data to not have interference, to not make sure it's all calibrated. And what we don't see on the show is that level of grunt work going on.
Yeah.
It's more like, hey, I've got a rocket, let's try to launch a rocket,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
see if we can stimulate something, and I'll go in the command center and watch to see if I can see something, and at
Yeah.
the same time do this. Okay, well, did you walk through that whole experiment, have it completely calibrated? Could you have added additional sensors or something like that to look at things? All that careful planning to do a study on an object needs to happen. And what we don't see is that kind of thing necessarily in the show.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me that the purpose of the show is to open people's minds that these things are going on and that it's worthy of study and interest. And I mean, and Eric has mentioned that, at some point in the future, and also Brandon, that they will put together peer-reviewed studies and or papers and try to get that stuff in front of the public. But it almost seems like its purpose is to sort of whet the appetite and open people's minds.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you there. I think, again, you have to look at the fact that this, it is entertainment as well. Yeah. Entertainment and education is what that I see it's about. So I think that overall, if you had a carefully constructed scientific show, probably no one would watch it.
Well, a lot of tedium, right? I mean, it's like there's a sexy side of science, but there's also doing the same steps over and over again and looking for slight deviations and that kind of thing. And it's not as sexy as UAPs darting into the mesa or whatever.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to wrap it up here, I mean, it's been about half an hour, but if you had to approach the still skeptical scientific community, or folks that are on the border or on the fence about whether or not they should really seriously engage with this topic or not, what's your best argument for why this is worthy of study and how this might be transformative in the long run?
Well, I think that, for me, it's a situation where, I've dedicated my whole life to this thing. And why did I do that? Because I think that there's actually a scientific value in studying it. And I think that we just have to apply the right tools to do that and the right minds to dedicated to do it. We can potentially get answers from that. And think about those answers. if you have answers about how the craft are maneuvering, what they're doing, how they maneuver at interstellar speeds, if they have material strength that's way beyond ours, if you can have an object drop at Mach 55 and not tear apart, or come apart and disintegrate, or that it doesn't have any kind of a kinetic effect in the atmosphere, or there's no sonic boom. Why wouldn't science want to figure out what that is?
Yeah.
And I think that my argument is that I think that it's definitely needed. I think that the time is right now. People are starting to open up more about that and are willing to hear what you have to say. And so I encourage them to now, if they haven't in the past got involved with it, get involved and help us figure out what the phenomena is. It's worthy of study. The government's now said that they do exist. We've got a whole Defense Department and Intelligence Department trying to figure that out, and so help us to figure that out.
Yeah. Do you feel? I mean, you've studied this your whole life. Do you feel a sense of vindication that this is finally coming around and people are waking up to it?
Well, it sure helps with the family. My family was sitting out there saying, "Are you a nut? Going after this UFO stuff and stuff like that." But yeah, to me, it's a vindication. I've had a lot of people say, "Well, you must feel vindicated." I sure, yeah. Why wouldn't
Yeah,
I?
of course not. Yeah, of course.
I mean, I'm not a kook. I'm out there trying to figure out what this phenomenon is about. We need to do that, and we need to spend time because it is a global phenomena. I mean, it's not just in the United States. And if I told you there's like reported sightings of a white crow, why wouldn't we want to go out and find out about that white crow? I mean, so again, it's like, why wait? Get involved and go after this thing and actually help us to figure that out. And I feel very much vindicated.
Yeah. When I title you doctor, PhD, what subject, what would you like me to mention as far as your credentials?
Okay, well, first off, I'm not a PhD.
Okay, that's fine.
All right.
Either
no
am
problem. No, I've been dedicated to science for a long time. I'm actually, when you look at my job, I'm actually a senior IT engineering analyst for
Okay.
the Department of Defense. I'm a contractor.
Okay. Okay.
And so
Defense contractor.
Yeah, defense contractor.
So you know all the secrets.
Yeah. Well, I get the chance to do all that look at the behind the doors a little bit, but
I have an unrelated question that I'm not going to use for the show, but that kid in back east who was getting into the confidential materials, he was in IT, right?
Yeah.
Any thoughts about
well,
that? Just, I mean, off the record.
When you are in IT, you do have a little bit of access to different things, and of course, I also have access to a lot of different things, and so I periodically get involved, and there are things that are up there that I question, like why is it up on a classified system when we could be having this kind of conversation down on a lower level, right?
Yeah.
But then periodically somebody brings up something and you go like, well, okay, I guess we can't talk about that. For example, on the very high top secret JWIC side, you have even groups of people collecting and collaborating on the UAPs.
Yeah, I've heard that. That's become a thing now,
Yeah.
where a lot of people are in and out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and and I'm on the secret side, you have situations where there's repositories of information, including some videos and other things that are being passed along to Arrow, I guess, or something of that nature from the different branches.
Yeah.
So you can see those kinds of things that are being passed along and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, bottom line is that they are cooperating. People are cooperating and trying to be able to come together and be able to figure out how the best way to do that, and that's good. At the same time, it's not privy to the general public. And so they don't have the confidence that maybe it's being studied or discussed, and yet it is.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting issue we're having right now, where there's obviously been overclassification and overprotection of a lot of information, but then there's also, these leaks that happen, and then the situation with the former president and the materials that he had at his house. It's like, we want to protect our secrets, and that's very important, but we also don't want to overprotect everything. And that is a difficult subject to get a hold of, I think.
it's a delicate dance that, you have to make. It's like, well, you've signed a non-disclosure agreement or something of that nature. You've got, like, your classification is going to be going from now until the time I'm dead, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah,
And so you're like hesitant because, number one, you don't want to lose a clearance that you've worked very hard to get. At the
sure.
same time, you're trying to abide by all the various rules and not wanting to let the enemy know,
Hmm.
if you would,
Yeah,
what's going on in any in any detail, because you and I know, and probably others know it as well, that we're being hit on a almost on a minute by minute basis from attempts to hack into the DoD systems,
sure. Yeah,
and the intelligence world systems and stuff like that. So that's happening. And so consequently, information is, you don't want to pass along information that you've spent a gazillions of dollars to be able to actually invest in this weapon system, and now you're just going to hand it over so China doesn't have to do the R&D work themselves.
yeah,
And so that's the kind of delicate dance that we do. A lot of us, we're human. We put on our pants just the same way you all do, but at the same time, we just have access to a little bit more information that we know about.
yeah,
That it's not like 99 boo boo that you can,
yeah, yeah. No,
you know.
obviously,
Uh,
yeah,
but you and I know that, I mean, that first off, we have spies living within the United States. There are people that are actually spying locally at installations we have, and
sure.
so there's a challenge there, and that's going to be there probably for a while.
Yeah, and as more of this comes out, it's going to get even more, I think, difficult, because there's going to be clamoring for, if this
Yeah,
comes out as a big secret that's been held, people are going to be like, well, what else is there? And then that's going
yeah.
to be
And so think about that just real quick, with you, James. Let me also say that,
yeah,
if you have a SAP program that, or it's basically a special access is required, to be able to get to that information because it's highly classified because for a reason, right?
hmm,
Uh, or you might have an unacknowledged SAP where it's not acknowledged at all, and nobody knows about it, with the exception of just a few people on some sort of a list, a bigot list.
hmm,
So then you have a situation where just those people know about this, and it's highly classified. And let's say that it's about the crash retrieval stuff. Are you now going to say, well, just because I've got a whistleblower talking about it, that I'm now so that I'm going to let you all know about it when it's unacknowledged?
yeah,
I mean, many of these things don't even let you know the name
yeah,
of the actual effort. They come up with a code name for it,
hmm,
and even that name is classified. So I'm not expecting that suddenly the public is going to get what they want, which is basically an open door. Here is the announcement saying that XYZ company is doing crash retrievals for the US government.
yeah. Do you
It's
think that the efforts made by the Senate in the newest version of the whatever it's called, the NDAA or whatever, to force that out by saying within 6 months you'll lose funding and that sort of thing, do you think that might instigate that, or are they going to just come to the Senate and say these are the reasons why we can't?
Yeah, I think that it probably be a mixture of both of those things.
Yeah.
I think that political people are in there for, well, first off, what clearance level do they have?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, even a congressional leader might get some information given to them, but it might be couched very carefully.
Sure.
And but yet you're not going to see that Senate Intelligence Committee coming up and making some sort of a huge announcement to the general public that's saying, we have project XYZ that is out of XYZ company.
Yeah.
And
In this part of the country, in this base or
yeah,
whatever, and all of that. Yeah.
an SAP program is going to be highly classified to the nth degree, and you're not going to see any kind of a major announcement from that, in my view.
Yeah. It's interesting times we're living in.
It sure is.
I wouldn't want to pick any other time. Right now we're right on the cusp of something. We know that.